From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Pig Patrol, how officers managed to capture this little piggy that made a break for it. The EPA makes it official regarding summer sales of E15. The White House wants farmers to grow more wheat and soybeans, but how realistic is that?
Does this money end up just supporting higher input costs and higher rent costs?
A deeper dive into what's proposed and the questions that remain right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We're hearing more about the Biden administration's plan to try and get farmers to grow more wheat and soybeans to stave off world hunger amid the Russia invasion of Ukraine. And the president last week calling on Congress to approve additional aid to Ukraine. The request includes $500 million for two proposals that would increase production of U.S. crops. So here's the breakdown of the two proposals. First, the Biden administration wants to increase wheat loan rates by 63% to $5.52 a bushel, soybeans by 40%, rice and pulses by 21%. Now, the White House says the increases would provide producers with two benefits, starting with providing access to additional low-cost credit and extending the loan term to 12 months for this year. It says next year, the higher loan rate would provide a higher price floor that would provide more price certainty for farmers. The administration also wants to increase production by providing incentives for double cropping wheat. The request provides a $10 an acre incentive paid through crop insurance premiums for a soybean crop planted after a winter wheat crop in 2023. The idea here, encourage farmers to add more wheat production while still being able to produce a spring crop.
In total, the administration estimates that these incentives will help U.S. farmers make up for up to 50% of the wheat that's typically exported by Ukrainian farmers, while also lowering costs for Americans. So we're really excited about this proposal. We're excited to give farmers an extra tool to help out in this and support Ukraine.
But how realistic is this proposal? First, it has to get through Congress, where Farm Journal Washington analyst Jim Wiesmeyer says it will likely be altered by lawmakers. The idea also bringing more questions in farm country, including whether the double crop incentive is only for counties with approved double cropping. And then what about loan repayments? Jim saying that sources he's spoken to do not see much of an impact from these proposals, with some calling them baffling and convoluted. Now, some farmers and grain market analysts worry about unintended consequences.
In a situation like we have this year where inputs are incredibly tight, expenses are through the roof, does this money end up just supporting higher input costs and higher rent costs and, just kind of perpetuating that situation? And I think it might. And so I'm not sure that how much incentive that this money flows to the producer and actually results in additional production.
So what do you think of the plan? Could it alter your planting decisions for later this year and next? We want to hear about it from you. You can head over to our Facebook page and look for the stories we've posted about it and leave your thoughts. Now, the largest man-made reservoir in the country has now fallen to unprecedented levels. Look at these pictures from Lake Mead, Nevada. Those are intake valves. They have been in service since 1971, now above the water line there, exposed for the first time. And of course, that means those valves can no longer draw water, forcing one pump station to have to shut down. The Water Authority there now operating its new Low Lake pumping station for the first time. It was completed back in 2020 and specifically built to deal with the area's worsening drought. It was an active weekend in the Midwest for farmers who are already running behind in planting. Could they get a break this week? Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joins us with a look ahead. Matt.
Yeah, that's right, Clinton. We do need a little bit of break there in the Midwest, and they could see a little bit of that, but it will be an active week. We'll start you off with our weather watch. Again, a very active week for much of the lower 48. That's something that we're going to be dealing with really in all of the regions, especially those planting regions. Rain and storms for the Plains states, especially the Central Plains, starting out the week here. Heading into Monday and Tuesday, very active weather. And then the Midwest will be drying out, but we may have to wait till the end of this week to be able to get a few dry days there up in parts of the Midwest. So let's flip over and let's take a look at our surface map for Monday. A couple of systems moving into the Pacific Northwest. It'll be a little bit on the cooler side there with rain, some higher elevation snow, and a couple of rumbles of thunder not out of the question. Now the Southwest has been very hot lately. It is going to stay very warm and very sunny. Yeah, that drought continues in the west. Storm system moving through that central plains, kind of out of the southern Rockies there, is going to bring a warm front to the north. So out ahead of that, very warm, very moist air. Another dry line could spark up a few thunderstorms, and out ahead of that, central plains into the southeast, going to be dealing with some rain and thunderstorms, some of which could be on the heavier side. And then another system exiting the east coast. That will bring some shower activity as that storm system moves off the east coast as we head through today and into tomorrow. And some people getting in on some much needed rain. Scott Sonnenberg of Spearman, Texas, sharing this video. He said the rain was a blessing and that it had been a while since they'd seen much of any rain. In fact, they got just about an inch of rain there very recently. And Spearman is in the Panhandle, an area that had extreme to exceptional drought. Hopefully, it's a start of more moisture to come. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
The U.S. now has its first reported human case of bird flu. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reporting that a person in Colorado has tested positive. They say the man was mostly asymptomatic, reporting only that he was tired. He is now in isolation and taking an antiviral drug. Officials say the man had direct exposure to poultry and was involved in the culling of poultry that it's believed had highly pathogenic avian influenza. Now they say this case has not changed their human risk assessment for the general public, which the CDC considers to be low. To date, the virus has been found in commercial and backyard birds in 29 states. Discussions regarding the next farm bill are underway. Legislators on the Senate Ag Committee holding their first hearing at Michigan State University, listening to comments from farmers, including dairy producers, orchard owners, along with operators of food banks, each sharing what is working with the current farm bill and what they would like to see improved in the future. Some pointing out that the speed can sometimes be a problem when it comes to implementing government programs.
Farmers get frustrated quickly. They need to move. They're making huge decisions about their livelihood. And when things are at a snail's pace on the delivery systems, that's a real problem. And I see a lot of nodding heads.
The House Ag Committee started its hearings on the new farm bill earlier this year. However, some feel there could be an extension of the 2018 law as Republicans expect they will take control of the House following the November elections. The EPA making it official, clearing the way for summer E15 sales by issuing an emergency fuel waiver. The decision follows President Biden's announcement about it last month in Iowa. It means Americans will be able to fill their tanks with gas that has a 15% ethanol blend through September 15th. The agency saying the president was taking action to protect Americans from supply issues by reducing the reliance on fossil fuels, building U.S. energy independence, supporting American ag and manufacturing, and accelerating the transition to clean energy. And we may get updated biofuel blending mandates in the coming days. That's according to new reports. Two sources telling news service Reuters the EPA is expected to send biofuel blending mandates for 2020, 2021, and 2022 to the White House for final review this week. That follows the agency's proposed rules released back in December. Now, it's not known whether the mandates would be different than the December proposal. The decision comes as consumers face high gas prices, oil over $100 per barrel, and an economy trying to recover from COVID disruptions. Consumers are still buying meat in a big way, but researchers warn inflation may slow that demand in the coming year. This comes from analysis with CoBank's Knowledge Exchange. Economists there expect retail meat prices to climb throughout 2022 as higher feed costs, energy, and labor work their way into wholesale prices. You can see the rise in feed costs on this graphic from CoBank. The combined cutout values for beef, pork, and chicken are up 22% year over year in the first quarter. Those three sectors are also dealing with lower inventory numbers or pressure. CoBank expects that to eventually impact consumer decisions, likely pushing them toward lower priced proteins, which is typically poultry or chicken. With current prices and weather problems aplenty, what should farmers do about marketing their grain crops? We have some ideas coming up next. And later, Machinery Pete explaining a new machinery buying trend he's never seen in all of his years in the industry. His Monday musings right after weather.
It's time to sign up for the 2022 United Pork Americas Conference in Orlando, Florida. Register today at unitedporkamericas.com and join us September 7th through the 9th.
The U.S. economy continues in fits and starts as the latest GDP numbers show a decline of 1.4% in the first quarter. That's in contrast to the final quarter of 2021 when GDP grew at nearly 7%, its best performance since 1984. Now, the Commerce Department released the data on Thursday. GDP measures goods and services in the U.S. over a 3-month period. This is the economy's worst performance since midway through 2020 when the pandemic was in full swing. Now, what drove that economic performance lower? An outbreak of Omicron infections to start the year, inflation at a 4-decade high, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Joining us today, we have Brian Doherty, Total Farm Marketing. Brian, as we try to figure out what these markets are doing, obviously we're at some really high levels here, but I think a lot of folks are just trying to figure out, well, what do I do about it? You know, it's early in the season. There's still a lot of unknowns.
Right, and so logically, most farmers have made some sales along the way for new crop and been selling the old crop along the way. But as far as the new crop, the argument would be look at time of year and first of all, maybe get away from the news and just look at price and time of year. This is a whale of a price. It's a time of year where typically, if we look back historically, both corn and soybean markets do have a tendency to peak in the March, April, May window. Well, here we are. And in part because if the weather breaks and farmers push with the technology, equipment, and farming practices these days, a lot of crop can go in the ground in a hurry. So that is the kind of the top priority, is to making sure rewarding rallies and looking long term. With such tight world inventories and uncertainty, it becomes more of a balancing act. And so we're really talking and encouraging farmers to really think about understanding their marketing tools. It is a time of year to use put options. It is a time of year to forward sell grain and cover with, let's say, a bull call spread. Strategies that keep you balanced, because we look at a market right now, Clinton, I could make the argument corn could quickly rally another $1 or it could drop off $2. And so where's that going to leave you? So consistent sales, balance, cover sales, cover unpriced grain through use of put options this time of year.
Anything different for soybeans?
It's really the same parallel path. We've got new crop prices over $15 a bushel. You can argue, well, they're behind the old crop price. We're exports are strong. It looks like, according to the last USDA numbers, we're looking at 2 million more acres of beans. So there could be a lot of beans. In particular, the perception down the road will be that South America will plant more beans and the world might use less beans here. So same thing, that balance act. We like to encourage up to that 40-50% sold by the end of May, and we've got the prices to do that. So let's make sure we're securing those dollars on those bushels that we feel confident we're going to grow and deliver.
Great perspective. Sure appreciate it, Brian. Thank you for being here. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back, meteorologist Matt Yurosavik here. And Matt, we're starting with the drought monitor from about a month ago because it has changed, and boy, we've seen some rains here in the last few weeks.
Yeah, we have, especially in the northern plains states. We've seen it up in the Dakotas. That's really helped drought conditions up there, and parts of the south saw improvements as well. And if we put our map into motion here, since 4 weeks ago, we're going to see a little bit of change, especially out in the west, but still a lot of drought conditions persisting in especially parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, where we're seeing extreme to exceptional drought. And that area right there has gotten a little bit worse. That's the area that we've seen a lot of those fire weather outlooks over the past couple of weeks, even back into the Rockies and towards the Sierras and the San Joaquin Valley. Still very, very dry, but improvements were seen in the northern plains, up into the Pacific Northwest, and down along the Gulf Coast as well. Still abnormally dry in a few spots in the east, but again, we're going to be expecting a pretty unsettled week ahead, and that's something that could factor into the next drought outlook coming up later this week. So here's a look at that precipitation heading through this week. Notice where most of it is, right there in the center of the country. And it's not just a little bit of rain. This is showing upwards of 3, 4, 5 inches of rain in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. These are areas that really, really need that rain, even back up into the northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest. And then all of that spreads eastward, helping out some of those abnormally dry spots in the east as well. So here's a look at that jet stream, again, keeping it pretty unsettled with a couple of short waves moving through, another one coming in on Tuesday into the southwest, and then working its way up into the Rockies and eventually up through the center of the country. That's what's going to bring an unsettled second half of the week before the Midwest starts to dry out and it turns warmer as well. Temperatures this week, though, staying below normal there in the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. Below normal, though, for much of the south and southwest. If we look at the precipitation, it's going to be above normal for most of the country except for the southwest and the extreme Great Lakes region and the Midwest. Here's the May temps, though, as a whole, cooler than average up in the north and warmer than average in the south, and more precipitation expected along the east while staying dry back in the west. That's a look around the country. Now let's take a look at the weather where you live. Creola, Ohio, sunny and warm, a high of 74 degrees. Topeka, Kansas, cloudy with showers, a high of 67. And Goldendale, Washington, breezy with showers likely, a high of 51.
Up next, buying farm equipment that's not for the farm. Machinery Pete joins us next. And later, a hot pursuit in Portland lands the perpetrator in the pen in the country. Traditionally, farm equipment purchases were made to help improve production on the farm. But as Machinery Pete tells us, right now, some farmers are making the decision to buy for other reasons altogether.
Well, folks, I got to tell you, there's a new trend I've seen developing maybe the past 6 months. Buying used equipment as a hedge. Yep, as a hedge. Now, years ago, I first started to see a little bit of this in the used planter market with a couple of the very wet springs that we had years ago. And of course, the number one thing you guys, can't have out there is downtime. And the farm's getting larger. So maybe as you were able buying a backup planter to have in case problem with your main planter, you can just pop in the backup planter and away you go, no downtime. Well, this current farm equipment market is such that the mix of conditions with the supply chain issue just pinching the availability of new equipment. And by the way, that's probably going to get worse here in the short term with China locking down their, Beijing and Shanghai, shipping issues. That's just going to get worse. And couple that with what's been the reality on the dealer used lot, the tightest used inventory I've ever seen. So these conditions, I started to notice last fall with, parts availability during harvest, and we started to see people driving 400 or 500 miles for that one little widget that they need. Farmers, it was getting scary. It's the first time in 32 years I've ever used the word scary in reporting about the farm equipment market. So I began to see last November aggressive buying of a tractor, a combine, a planter, sprayer, whatever, as a backup, as a hedge. And again, this trend has just been washing over the market. And I think it's going to continue here the rest of 2022.
All right, thanks, Pete. Well, if you thought that was a hot take, we've got a pig time pursuit in Portland you won't want to miss. Details on a bacon seed bust next. There's nothing like a good old-fashioned foot chase to show our men and women in blue in action, but this portly porcine took Portland cops for a ride recently. This pig was found standing in the middle of a street a few nights ago. Obviously a big problem for drivers passing through the area. So a few other police showed up, 7 to be exact, to get their new pig pal off the road to protect him and prevent people from crashing. Now, there were a few short foot pursuits, but in the end, they came up with the perfect plan. Snacks, the pig living up to his name, pigging out on goldfish, crackers, and cookies. For now, the pig is being called John Doe, though there's been a plethora of other suggestions, and he's staying at a local animal rescue. Portland police say anyone who knows their pal John can call the shelter directly. And that's going to wrap us up on this Monday morning. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Thanks for watching. Have a great week out in Farm Country.